In this video, we're going to take a look at the 2024 electoral map based on the newest poll from every single state. We have a ton of new polls to cover, with Trump continuing to lead in the key battleground states, but he's actually expanding the electoral map now, and he's becoming more competitive in states like Minnesota and New Hampshire, and in Virginia, Biden's lead has been completely wiped out. We'll begin with the West Coast and then move our way down south up into the Northeast and finish off with the Midwest. So starting off with the state of Washington, according to the latest poll, Biden leads by just an 8% margin. That is quite abysmal. This poll conducted by Cascade PBS in early May. And so according to this new data, Washington is only going to be a likely Democratic state, even though it voted for Joe Biden by 19 points in 2020. Down in Oregon, Biden leads by 16 points in the latest poll. However, this poll was conducted all the way back in October of last year, so it is likely to be a bit outdated. Trump is probably doing better now than he was over half a year ago, but this is the newest data we have, and so Oregon is going to be a solid blue state. California will be solid as well, with Joe Biden leading by 23 points in the latest poll. This is still a pretty significant drop-off from the 30-point victory he had in the last election, but California is going to be solid blue nonetheless. Now, in our first two battleground states of Nevada and Arizona, in Nevada, Trump is ahead by 5 points, according to the most recent Fox News poll. This was conducted at the very beginning of June, and when looking at the polling average over time, although this is a state that Biden won by over 2 points in 2020, Trump has consistently been ahead in the silver state going all the way back to November of last year. Joe Biden has not ever really come close to taking back the lead, and so Trump is performing very well in Nevada. This is probably going to be a flip, and in the five-way polling average, Trump leads by an even larger margin. And so this will make the state of Nevada likely Republican, according to that most recent poll that has Trump ahead by 5 points. While in Arizona, the former president leads by 5 points in the most recent poll as well. This one also conducted by Fox News, and if you look at the polling average, Biden has never even come close. He's never been ahead throughout this cycle, despite the fact that Arizona was a blue state in 2020. This was Biden's second closest victory, behind only Georgia, which was very slightly more competitive. So Arizona as well will be likely red based on the latest poll. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more political content like this leading up to the election in November. Moving on to Colorado and New Mexico, two states that used to be competitive in the early 2000s. They flipped to Obama in 2008, and they've been blue ever since, with Joe Biden winning Colorado by 14 points in the last election and New Mexico by 11. Today, however, Biden leads by just 6 points in the most recent Colorado poll. This one was conducted back in January of this year, so it's more than likely that Trump is performing better now than he was a few months ago. However, this is all the data we have, and right now, the state of Colorado is just barely going to be a likely blue state. While in New Mexico, we see some similar numbers, with Biden ahead by 8 points according to the most recent poll, but this was conducted all the way back in August of last year, so it really has been a while. New Mexico is probably going to be more competitive than Colorado, especially as the Hispanic vote continues to turn away from Democrats, and of course, New Mexico is the state with the largest Hispanic population, so New Mexico is going to be likely blue as well. Now, looking at the states in the middle of the country, we've gone over these polls many times. There aren't any new surveys from these states. However, Trump does lead by solid 20-30 point margins in the most recent polls in every single one of them. So we're just going to mark all of them to be blue, although we do have a poll from the 2nd District of Nebraska, which is competitive. And according to the latest poll, Joe Biden leads by 5 points in this three-way poll between Biden Biden, Trump, and Kennedy. So Nebraska's 2nd congressional district is going to be likely Democratic. Joe Biden did win this by a likely margin in 2020, defeating Trump by 6.6%. And Kansas and Oklahoma will be solid red too. Moving down to Texas, 40 electoral votes. This is going to be a major prize for the former president. He leads by 8 points in the most recent poll. Honestly, not his best performance. This was all the way back in April, according to the University of Texas. We've seen polls where he's even gone up to 11 points, and this is still a pretty big improvement considering that Donald Trump only won Texas by 5 points in 2020. He did win it by 9 in 2016. We're probably going to see a margin closer to what we saw 8 years ago this November. So Texas is going to be likely Republican, while in Alaska and Hawaii, we do have polls from these two states now. In Alaska, Trump leads by 12 points in the only poll conducted, so this will make the state solid red. And to finish off the entire western half of the U.S. with Hawaii, according to the most recent poll, we see Biden ahead by 19 points. So the state of Hawaii is going to be solid for Joe Biden. Moving on to the Deep South, we're going to see a whole lot of red, just like we did in this northwestern region. States like Montana, South Dakota, Wyoming, these states aren't going to be close. And states like Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana aren't going to be either. So we're just going to fill them all in right now. All of these states are going to be solid for Donald Trump. They were solid in 2016, they were solid in 2020, and they will be solid in 2024. And the most recent polls from every single one of these states do confirm this fact. So moving on to Virginia, our first competitive state in the South, we see some pretty surprising numbers here. Joe Biden, for context, won the Commonwealth of Virginia by 10 points in 2020. Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, was elected governor just 1 year later in 2021. However, fast forward another 3 years to 2024, and Joe Biden no longer really leads in this state at all. Donald Trump has tied with Biden in the two latest polls conducted in May and June, and the only polls where we see Biden actually ahead were conducted over half a year ago in December of 2023. This most recent Fox News poll does show a tie between the two candidates. However, with Biden still ahead in the polling average, we're just going to give him the benefit of the doubt and give him the slight edge over Donald Trump on this map. Virginia is going to be tilt Democratic, but Joe Biden really is in a lot of trouble if Virginia becomes a competitive state. In North Carolina, this was one of the most competitive races in 2020, with Donald Trump just winning by 1.3%, much closer than it was in 2016 when Clinton lost by nearly 4%. And North Carolina hasn't voted blue since 2008, when Obama barely scraped by with a victory. Before that, you'd have to go to the election of Jimmy Carter in 1976. But in 2024, North Carolina is a pretty red state. Donald Trump leads by 5 points in the most recent poll conducted by East Carolina University. He's ahead in the polling average, and if you look at the polls over the last few months, I mean, there's never really been a point where Biden even came close. If you go back to 2020, I mean, Biden was performing significantly better. The polls showed that he was on track to winning for a majority of the election cycle. He eventually lost by a pretty narrow margin, but this is nothing like what we're seeing for this election in 2024. So North Carolina is going to be likely Republican. In Georgia, we see Donald Trump ahead by 5 points in the most recent poll as well. This was conducted by Quinnipiac, and if you look at the polling, I mean, it's not even close. Donald Trump is going to win this state back. Georgia flipping blue was a pretty big surprise and probably Biden's most impressive victory in 2020. He won the state by a quarter of a percentage point, but he's not going to win it again. If you compare the polling for 2024 back to what we saw in 2020, you'll see basically the comparison we had in North Carolina. In the five-way polling average, Trump leads by virtually the same margin. So the Peach State is also going to be likely Republican based on that most recent Quinnipiac poll. And to finish off the southeastern region with Florida, 30 electoral votes. This is another big prize for the Trump campaign, and Florida used to be a very competitive state. I'm sure you all remember, but that is no longer the case. The Sunshine State is now one of the most Republican states in the country, and if you look at the polling average, Trump is actually ahead by 8 points, but according to the most recent poll conducted by Fox News, Trump only leads by 4, and this is the poll we're going to go off of for the purposes of this map. Trump has led in basically every single poll from the state so far, and if you look at the list of battleground states, Florida isn't even included. That's just how much it's shifted to the right in recent years. So the Sunshine State of Florida is going to be lean Republican. Up north in the Northeast, many of these races are going to be reliable for Joe Biden. He won them in the last elections. He's leading by solid margins according to the most recent polling. So we're going to fill in the District of Columbia, Maryland, his home state of Delaware, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island as solid Democratic states. No real point in getting into them in too much detail. Now moving on, we do have some states that will be significantly more competitive than they were in the last election, namely 3 states in the tri-state area. If you look at the margins from the last election in New York, Biden won it by 23 points, he won Connecticut by 20 points, and New Jersey by 16. Today, however, Biden's lead has shrunk to just 7 points in New Jersey, and we see the same thing in New York. Just a 7-point margin separate the two presumptive major party nominees, while in Connecticut, Biden is ahead by just 9% according to the most recent poll. This means that according to our map, all 3 of these states are going to be likely Democratic, significantly more competitive than they were 4 years ago. Up in New Hampshire, the race is tightening here as well, with Biden ahead by just 4 points, according to the most recent survey conducted by the University of New Hampshire. This will make the Granite State lean Biden. And finally, up in Maine, the most recent poll shows us that Donald Trump is actually leading in the state as a whole. He's up by 6 points, while in the 1st district, Biden leads by 8, and in the 2nd district, Trump leads by 20. So Donald Trump right now is on track to flipping the state of Maine, where it is likely Republican. The 2nd district is going to be solid red, and the 1st district will be likely blue. And finally, we are left with the Midwest. This is where the election will be decided. I mean, no candidate is at 270 yet, and none are really that close either. They will have to win quite a few states in this region if either of them want to get to 270. So we're going to start off with Minnesota, a state that Donald Trump is going to target heavily, and it is a state that he can win. In 2016, he came within 2 points of actually winning it. So in Minnesota right now, according to the most recent poll, Biden leads by just 2 points. This is a pretty small margin considering that he did win the state by 7 points in 2020. So Minnesota is barely going to be lean blue. Illinois is going to be likely for Biden. He leads by 9 points according to the most recent poll. We're going to get some of these more solid states out of the way first and really just focus on Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which is really where the election will come down to. Iowa and Ohio are both going to be solid red. In Iowa, the most recent poll shows Trump leading by an astounding 15 points. Just 3 election cycles ago, this state voted blue. Same in Ohio, which also voted for Obama in 2012. Donald Trump leads by 12 points in the most recent poll. So both Iowa and Ohio will be solid red, and of course, so will Indiana, where the former president is ahead by 21. And finally, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the 3 states that made up the blue wall that Donald Trump tore down in 2016 when he flipped all of them by tilt margins. Biden has since won them back very narrowly, but they are probably going to be just as close in 2024. In Wisconsin, Donald Trump leads by 1% in the most recent survey, and the polls here have shown a very close race over the last few months. Although Trump has maintained a very slight edge, this state really could go both ways, but as of right now, Donald Trump maintains a slight lead. So Wisconsin is going to be tilt Republican. Michigan is going to be very close as well. The most recent poll actually shows a tie. Donald Trump, though, does lead in the average by 0.3%. His margin in the Wolverine state has been cut down over the last few months as Biden inches closer. However, Trump has still maintained a lead consistently since all the way back to October of last year. So the Wolverine state we're going to fill in as tilt Republican. The two candidates are tied in the most recent poll, but Trump still maintains a very slight edge in the polling average. And finally, Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes. This is Joe Biden's birth state. The Keystone State is currently expected to go to Trump. He leads by 2% in the most recent poll and is actually ahead in all 7 of the 7 most recently conducted surveys. Donald Trump's lead in Pennsylvania has actually been widening over the last few weeks, and as a result, it will be placed into the lean Republican column. And so with the 2024 electoral map filled in, with the latest polls from every single state, Donald Trump leads with 314 electoral votes to Joe Biden's 224. Thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe to my channel right now if you haven't for more content like this leading up to November.